After suffering a stroke, my son took over my law firm, claiming that I was too old to run it. The following month, I began volunteering at a community center where I helped a man with legal problems. I never suspected that a simple act of kindness would unravel a secret that would turn my life upside down. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The stroke happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd been reviewing the Morrison estate case. 40 years of practice had taught me that Tuesdays were for estates and wills. When my mind was sharpest, the words on the page had started to swim, then blur, then disappear entirely. My right hand wouldn't lift the pen. The mahogany desk my late husband had given me for our 20th anniversary suddenly felt miles away, and I was falling toward it, slowly, like sinking through water. When I woke 3 days later in the hospital, my son Dylan was standing at the foot of my bed with a leather portfolio under his arm, not at my side. At the foot, like a businessman keeping his distance from an inconvenient obligation. Mom, thank God. His relief seemed practiced, the way he'd practiced his closing arguments in front of the bathroom mirror when he was fresh out of law school. The doctors say you're going to be fine. Some weakness on the right side, speech therapy, physical therapy. You'll recover most function. Most function. The words hung in the sterile air like a verdict. The firm, I managed to say, though my tongue felt thick and clumsy. That's what I need to talk to you about. Dylan pulled a chair closer but didn't sit. He opened the portfolio, and I saw documents. So many documents. I've been managing things while you were unconscious. Mom, we need to be realistic. You're 72. You've had a major health event. The partners are concerned about liability, about client confidence. I tried to sit up, but my body betrayed me, weak and uncooperative. I built that firm, 38 years, and it's been an incredible legacy. He was using his courtroom voice now, calm and inexorable, which is why we need to protect it. I've drawn up papers transferring operational control to me. You'll retain the title of founder, of course. And there's a pension, very generous considering the circumstances, $3,500 a month. The number hit me like a second stroke. I'd been pulling in $40,000 monthly, sometimes more. The firm bore my name, Helena Sawyer and Associates. I'd started it in a rented office above a dry cleaner in 1987, when being a woman in corporate law meant being twice as sharp and half as credited. Every client, every case, every reputation carefully built brick by brick, while raising 2 children after my husband died. Dylan, that's not, you also can't live in the house anymore. He said it gently, which somehow made it worse. The stairs, Mom, and the property taxes alone are $7,000 a quarter. I found you a wonderful apartment, ground floor, accessible, 1,200 square feet in a quiet building with a doorman. Everything was moving too fast. My head throbbed. The machines around me beeped their small, insistent warnings. There's one more thing. Dylan's voice changed, dropping into a register I'd never heard before. Not quite guilty, but close. The Riverside property development, the one I handled for you 18 months ago? I remembered. A commercial real estate deal. Complicated but promising. Dylan had insisted on managing it. Said it would establish him with the firm's wealthiest clients. I'd signed what he'd put in front of me. Trust, after all, begins at home. There's been a lawsuit. The partners in the development are claiming breach of contract, fraud. It's complex. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The problem is, Mom, you signed as the guarantor. I needed your name to secure the financing. Your reputation. The room tilted. How much? $700,000. Maybe more depending on the judgment. $700,000. My savings, my retirement accounts, my security, all of it would be seized to cover his mistakes. The mistakes he'd made using my name, my credibility, the reputation I'd spent 4 decades building. You did this on purpose. The words came out slurred but clear enough. You knew the deal was bad. Mom, that's not fair. I was trying to— Get out. You need to sign these papers. The sooner we transition things, the smoother. Get out. He left the papers on the rolling table beside my bed. 2 days later, after a hospital social worker confirmed I was lucid, a notary came to witness my signature I signed because I had no choice. because fighting would cost legal fees I could no longer afford, because my own son had made sure of that. 3 months later, I stood in the apartment Dylan had chosen for me, watching movers carry in the few pieces of furniture I'd been allowed to keep. The mahogany desk wouldn't fit through the door. They'd left it in the lobby, and I'd had to tell them to take it away, to donate it, to do whatever they wanted with it. The apartment was fine. Clean, bright, perfectly adequate. It felt like a waiting room. Physical therapy had restored most of my mobility. Speech therapy had smoothed out the slur in my words. But I was still diminished, still halved. Not by the stroke, but by what came after. The firm stopped calling. Dylan sent brief emails updating me on cases I'd originated, clients I'd known for decades, always with the unspoken message, "This is mine now. You're the past." The pension deposited on the first of each month, $3,500. Rent was $1,100. Utilities, food, medical copays, physical therapy, it all added up faster than I'd imagined. I'd never had to count dollars before, never had to choose between fresh vegetables and generic medication. I was 72 years old and I'd become invisible. The invisibility was the strangest part. I'd walk through my old neighborhood. I couldn't afford to live there anymore, but I'd visit the coffee shop where I'd met clients, and no one saw me. Not really. Their eyes would slide past, registering "old woman," and moving on to something more relevant, more present, more worthy of attention. I'd built a career on being seen, on commanding rooms, on making judges and opposing counsel listen. Now I was a ghost haunting the margins of my own life. On a Thursday in October, I saw a flyer at the grocery store. Volunteers needed at Riverside Community Center. Make a difference in your community. I almost walked past it. What did I have to offer anymore? But something made me take a photo with my phone, and that evening, sitting alone in my adequate apartment eating adequate soup, I called the number. "Oh, wonderful!" The woman who answered, Marcy, she said her name was Marcy, sounded genuinely delighted. "We're always looking for volunteers. What kind of experience do you have?" I was a lawyer, corporate law mostly, contracts, real estate, estate planning. There was a pause, and I braced myself for the questions. "Why aren't you practicing? What happened?" But Marcy just said, "Perfect. We have people coming in all the time with legal questions they can't afford to ask a real lawyer. When can you start?" I started the following Monday. The Riverside Community Center occupied a converted elementary school in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The gym was now a multi-purpose room where everything from AA meetings to children's art classes happened. The classrooms had been repurposed for job training, ESL classes, food distribution, and, in a small room that still had alphabet letters painted above the chalkboard, legal aid. "It's not official legal advice," Marcy explained, showing me the space. "We can't represent anyone or file papers, but we can help people understand their rights, review documents, explain what their options might be. A lot of our folks just need someone to translate the legal system into human language." I understood that. I'd spent my career doing exactly that for wealthy clients who could afford my time. Now I'd do it for people who couldn't. The first person I helped was a woman named Rosa, who was being evicted because her landlord claimed she'd violated her lease by having a dog. She didn't have a dog. She had a parakeet. I showed her how to document everything, explained her rights under the tenant protection laws, helped her draft a response to the eviction notice. She cried and hugged me, and something in my chest loosened just a little. The second person was a young father trying to understand his wife's medical bills after she'd died in childbirth. The hospital was threatening collections, but he didn't understand what he actually owed versus what insurance should cover. I spent 2 hours going through the statements with him, making phone calls, decoding the bureaucratic maze. By the end, we'd reduced his debt by $18,000. The third person changed everything. He came in on my 4th Thursday volunteering, just as I was packing up to leave. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Well-dressed but not ostentatiously so. Expensive jeans, a cashmere sweater, good shoes. He looked out of place in the community center, and he seemed to know it. "I'm sorry," he said, hovering in the doorway. "I know it's late. I can come back another time. It's all right." I gestured to the chair across from my borrowed desk. "What brings you here?" He sat slowly, like a man carrying an invisible weight. "I need advice, but I can't afford a lawyer. Not anymore. I thought maybe someone here could point me in the right direction. Tell me what's happened." And he did. His name was Frederick West, though he asked me not to use his full name outside this room, and 3 months ago, he'd discovered that his lawyer had been systematically stealing from him for the past 5 years. Real estate deals structured to siphon funds. Investment accounts drained through fraudulent transfers. A trust fund for his grandchildren emptied and hidden behind shell corporations. "How much?" I asked, my pen moving automatically across my notepad, the old instincts awakening. 4.2 million. Maybe more. I'm still discovering the extent of it." He laughed bitterly. "I built a manufacturing company from nothing. Sold it last year and planned to retire, to finally have time for my grandkids, to travel with my wife. Instead, I'm 61 years old and starting over. Have you filed a police report?" "Yes. They're investigating, but they say it could take years. The money's been moved through so many accounts, so many jurisdictions." He leaned forward. "The thing is, I need help understanding what else he might have done. I've been going through documents, and there are things I don't understand. Contract clauses that don't make sense, property transfers that seem wrong. I can't afford to hire another lawyer, not after all this. But I thought maybe someone could just look, could tell me if I'm crazy, or if there really is more fraud buried in here." He pulled out a folder thick with documents and set it on the table between us. I opened it. The first page was a contract for commercial property in the Riverside Development District. My hands went cold. I knew this property. I knew this deal. I turned to the second page, and there it was. The signature block, the lawyer's name typed in elegant legal font. Dylan Sawyer, Esquires, Helena Sawyer, and Associates. The room seemed to tilt again, just like it had when the stroke hit, like the ground was disappearing beneath me. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I looked up at Frederick West, at this decent man who'd been betrayed and robbed, who'd come to a community center looking for free help because he had nowhere else to turn. "Tell me everything," I said, my voice steady now, purposeful. "Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." And as he spoke, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. Purpose. The absolute certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. Frederick West talked for 2 hours straight. I let him, taking notes in the shorthand I'd developed over decades of client meetings, my hand moving across the page with a rhythm I'd thought I'd lost. Marcy poked her head in once, saw us deep in conversation, and simply mouthed, "Lock up when you're done," before disappearing. The community center grew quiet around us, the sounds of children's laughter and shuffling feet fading until there was nothing but Frederick's voice and the scratch of my pen. The story he told was methodical theft dressed up as sophisticated financial planning. It had started small, he said. Dylan had come highly recommended by another business owner, someone in Frederick's golf club who'd used the firm for a commercial real estate deal. "That should have been my first clue," Frederick said bitterly. The friend had later gone bankrupt, though Frederick hadn't connected the dots until now. "He seemed so competent," Frederick said, rubbing his temples. "Professional. Knowledgeable. He talked about tax optimization strategies, asset protection, legacy planning, all the things a man my age wants to hear when he's finally made enough money to stop worrying." Dylan had proposed a complex restructuring of Frederick's assets following the sale of his manufacturing company, real estate investments to diversify his portfolio, trusts to protect his grandchildren's inheritance, an LLC structure to minimize tax exposure. It all sounded brilliant, sophisticated, exactly the kind of high-level planning that wealthy people paid top dollar to receive. "I signed everything he put in front of me," Frederick said. "He was my lawyer. You're supposed to be able to trust your lawyer." Trust? That word again, like a knife between my ribs. The documents Frederick had brought painted a clear picture, once you knew what to look for. Properties purchased at inflated values from shell companies that Dylan controlled. Management fees paid to entities that existed only on paper. Investment accounts that showed steady returns in the quarterly statements but had actually been drained months earlier, the statements fabricated. It was elegant, in a horrible way. The kind of fraud that required intelligence and planning, that exploited the very trust that made the attorney-client relationship function. Dylan had learned well. I'd taught him to think strategically, to see the angles others missed, to understand how documents could be structured to achieve specific outcomes. I'd just never imagined he'd use those skills like this. The detective assigned to my case says the money's probably gone, Frederick continued. Offshore accounts, cryptocurrency, who knows? He says even if they prosecute, I'll never recover most of it. He looked at me with exhausted eyes. I don't even care about the money anymore, not really. I mean, I do. I'm not going to pretend losing $4 million doesn't hurt. But what really kills me is that I trusted him, that I brought him into my life, introduced him to my family, and he looked me in the eye month after month while he robbed me blind. I knew exactly how he felt. May I keep these documents? I asked. I'd like to review them more carefully. There might be things we can do, avenues for recovery that aren't immediately obvious. We? Frederick looked at me with something like hope. I can't pay you. I meant what I said about not being able to afford. I'm a volunteer here, I said. I don't charge, and besides, I have a personal interest in seeing that this lawyer faces consequences for what he's done. You know him? I hesitated. This was the moment to tell him, to reveal that the lawyer who'd destroyed his retirement was my son, that I was the woman whose name was still on the firm's letterhead, whose reputation had been used to lure him in, but something stopped me. Not shame exactly, though there was plenty of that. More a tactical instinct, the same one that had served me well in negotiations for 40 years. I needed to understand the full scope of what Dylan had done before I revealed my connection. I needed to be certain. I know his work, I said instead, which was true enough. I'm familiar with his methods. Frederick nodded slowly, accepting this. Can I ask you something? You clearly know your way around corporate law. The way you analyze those documents, that's not just volunteer-level knowledge. How did you end up here? It was a fair question, and I found myself wanting to answer honestly. I had a law firm, a good one. Then I had a stroke, and my son. I stopped, swallowed, recalibrated. Then I lost it all. Health crisis, bad investments, legal liabilities. You know how it goes. One day you're successful, the next day you're wondering if you can afford your blood pressure medication. I'm sorry. He said it simply, without pity, the way one survivor speaks to another. It's strange how fast it can all disappear, isn't it? Everything you built. Yes, I said. Very strange. We exchanged phone numbers before he left. I promised to call him within a week once I'd reviewed everything thoroughly. He shook my hand at the door, holding it a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, he said. You don't know how much this means. I've felt so alone in this. After he left, I sat in the quiet community center with his documents spread before me, and I let myself feel the full weight of what I'd discovered. My son, my youngest child, the boy I'd sent to law school, the young associate I'd mentored and promoted and trusted, was a thief. Not just careless or negligent, but actively, deliberately criminal. The Riverside development deal that had destroyed me wasn't an honest mistake. It was part of a pattern. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my small kitchen table with Frederick's documents and my laptop, cross-referencing names and dates, building timelines, following the money trails that Dylan had tried so carefully to obscure. By 3 a.m, I'd found 2 more victims. By 5, I'd found a 4th. All of them had used Helena Sawyer and Associates. All of them had worked specifically with Dylan. All of them had lost substantial sums in deals that shared the same structural DNA. Inflated property values, phantom management companies, fraudulent statements. The Riverside development that had made me a guarantor wasn't the crime. It was the cleanup operation, the way Dylan had covered his tracks by forcing the losses onto me. My stroke had been perfectly timed for him, a crisis he could exploit to take control of the firm and bury the evidence under the transition. I thought about calling him, confronting him, but 40 years of legal practice had taught me that confrontation without preparation was just drama. I needed evidence, documentation, a case so airtight that denial would be impossible. I needed to be smart about this. smarter than I'd been when I'd signed his papers in the hospital, when I'd trusted him with the Riverside deal, when I'd believed that blood meant loyalty. The next morning, I called Frederick. "I've reviewed your documents," I said. "You were right to be suspicious. This wasn't just negligence, it was systematic fraud. But there's something else. You're not the only victim." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "How many?" "At least 4 that I've found so far. Possibly more." "God." His voice cracked. "How much total?" "Roughly 12 million, spread across 4 clients over 5 years. Different schemes, same basic structure." I paused. "Frederick, I need to tell you something. The lawyer who did this, Dylan Sawyer, he's my son." The silence lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. "Your son," he finally said. "Yes. The firm was mine. I built it. He took it from me after I had a stroke, and I think he did it specifically to hide what he'd been doing. The Riverside deal that I signed as guarantor, that was him setting me up to take the fall for his fraud." Jesus. Another pause. "I'm sorry. I don't even know what to say to that." "You don't need to say anything. I'm telling you because you deserve to know who you're working with. And because if we're going to do this properly, you need to understand that I have my own stake in seeing him face consequences. It might compromise my objectivity." "Your objectivity." Frederick laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady, objectivity is the last thing I want. I want someone who understands what he did, who knows how much it costs. Not just the money, the trust, the sense that the world makes sense. He took that from both of us." "Yes," I said quietly. "He did. So what do we do?" That was the question, wasn't it? I was 72 years old, living on a pension that barely covered my expenses, with no law firm and no standing to practice. I'd been stripped of everything I'd built, made invisible, pushed aside as irrelevant. But I still knew how to build a case. I still understood how evidence worked, how to construct narratives that judges and juries would believe. And I still had something Dylan had probably forgotten about: institutional memory. I knew every client the firm had ever served, every deal we'd done, every relationship I'd cultivated over nearly 4 decades. "We build an airtight case," I said. "We document everything, find every victim, trace every dollar. We do it so carefully that when we bring it to the authorities, they have no choice but to act. And we do it quietly, because if Dylan finds out we're investigating, he'll disappear the evidence. That could take months. Probably, maybe longer." "I'm in," Frederick said immediately. "Whatever it takes. I've got nothing but time now." "There's one more thing," I said. "I can't represent you in court or file anything on your behalf, but I can help you understand the documents, organize evidence, and connect you with the right authorities. This is just 2 people who've been wronged trying to understand what happened to them. If it turns into something more, we'll need to bring in the proper authorities." "I understand. And Frederick? This might get ugly. He's my son, but he's also a criminal. When this comes out, my name is going to be connected to his crimes. The firm that bears my name was used to perpetrate fraud. My reputation, what's left of it, is going to take another hit. You're still willing to do this?" I thought about the mahogany desk that hadn't fit through my apartment door. I thought about my adequate soup in my adequate apartment, about being invisible, about signing papers in a hospital bed while my son dismantled everything I'd built. "Yes," I said. "I'm willing." We met at the community center 3 times a week after that. Frederick would bring documents, I would analyze them, finding patterns, building connections. Marcy never asked what we were working on, though she must have been curious about why the well-dressed man kept coming back to meet with the elderly volunteer in the legal aid room. We worked slowly, methodically. I taught Frederick how to read corporate filings, how to trace shell companies through public records, how to identify the signatures on documents that revealed who really controlled which entities. He had a good mind for it, detail-oriented, patient, willing to follow threads that might lead nowhere. "You would have made a good lawyer," I told him one evening. "I think I've seen enough of lawyers to last a lifetime," he said, but he smiled when he said it. Gradually, the case took shape. We found a 5th victim, then a 6th. We documented the flow of funds through a dozen shell companies. We identified the offshore accounts where Dylan had parked the stolen money. We built timelines and evidence chains and narrative structures that would make sense to prosecutors. And slowly, something else happened. I stopped feeling invisible. Not because anyone else saw me differently, but because I saw myself differently. I was doing work that mattered, using skills I'd spent a lifetime developing, fighting for something larger than myself. I realized, exactly who I'd always been. The stroke hadn't taken that. Dylan hadn't taken that. The only person who could take that away was me, and I'd been letting him. Not anymore. Winter settled over the city like a held breath. The community center became my second home. The small room with alphabet letters above the chalkboard transformed into a war room. Frederick and I covered the walls with timelines and flowcharts, connecting victims to shell companies to bank accounts with different colored strings like detectives in a crime drama. Marcy had stopped asking questions after the second week, simply bringing us coffee and occasionally Chinese takeout when she noticed we'd worked through dinner. "You two are either solving a murder or planning a heist," she joked one evening, setting down containers of lo mein. "Something like that," I said, and she laughed, not knowing how close to the truth she was. By December, we'd identified 9 victims, 9 people whose trust had been weaponized against them, whose savings had been methodically stolen by a lawyer they'd believed was protecting their interests. The total stood at just over $18 million. 18 million. The number was so large it had become abstract, meaningless. But when you broke it down into individual stories, it became devastating. Sharon Shu, 74, who'd lost her late husband's life insurance payout and now worked part-time at a grocery store to make ends meet. James and Elaine Odom, who'd trusted Dylan with their retirement accounts and now couldn't afford the assisted living facility they'd planned on. Anthony Reeves, a widower who'd wanted to set up trusts for his disabled daughter's care and instead lost everything, forcing her into an underfunded state program. Each file was a life destroyed. Each document was evidence of betrayal, and each one bore the letterhead of Helena Sawyer and Associates, my name at the top in elegant script. "How are you holding up?" Frederick asked one evening, watching me stare at Sharon Shu's file. "I keep thinking I should have known," I said. "I trained him. I taught him how to structure deals, how to read contracts, how to identify opportunities. Somewhere in all of that, I must have missed something. Some sign that he was capable of this. You taught him law. You didn't teach him to be a thief." Frederick leaned back in his chair, stretching. "My father was a mechanic. Taught me everything he knew about engines, about how things fit together. I used that knowledge to build a manufacturing company. My cousin used the same knowledge to run a chop shop stealing cars. Same skills, different character. The skills aren't the problem. When did you get so wise?" "Around the time I lost $4 million, he said dryly. "Perspective comes expensive." We'd developed an easy rhythm, Frederick and I. He had a sharp mind and an engineer's precision, the kind of methodical thinking that complemented my legal training. More than that, he understood what it felt like to have your life's work stolen by someone you'd trusted. We didn't need to explain the anger to each other, or the grief that came in unexpected waves, or the peculiar shame of having been fooled. "I've been thinking," Frederick said, pulling out a new folder, "about the Riverside development deal, the one he used you as guarantor for. I try not to think about that one. I know, but look at this." He spread out documents, property records, loan applications, title transfers. This deal wasn't just fraud, it was targeted fraud. He needed you specifically as the guarantor because your name carried weight that his didn't. And the timing, 6 months before your stroke. You think he knew I was going to have a stroke? No, but I think he knew he was running out of time. The other schemes were starting to unravel. Sharon Shu had started asking questions about her statements. The Odoms had requested an audit of their accounts. He needed a big score and a scapegoat, and you gave him both. I studied the documents, seeing the pattern I'd been too close to recognize. The stroke was just convenient timing. It accelerated his timeline, but he was already setting you up. Frederick pointed to a date on one of the loan applications. "Look when he had you sign this. 3 days after you'd been in the hospital for pneumonia. You remember that?" I did. Late February. A chest cold that had turned serious. I'd been exhausted, medicated, not thinking clearly. Dylan had visited me at home with papers he said needed immediate signatures for a time-sensitive opportunity. I signed them, I whispered. I was on antibiotics and cough syrup, and I signed everything because he was my son and I trusted him. He knew exactly what he was doing. The realization settled over me like ice water. The stroke hadn't been the beginning of Dylan's betrayal. It had been the culmination. He'd been positioning me, weakening my control, waiting for the right moment to take everything. The stroke had just given him the perfect opportunity to complete what he'd already started. "Are you okay?" Frederick asked gently. "No," I said, "but I will be." We took our evidence to the police in mid-December. Detective Karen Martinez listened to our presentation in a cramped interview room that smelled of old coffee and institutional cleaning products. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too many people at their worst. "Let me make sure I understand this," she said when we'd finished. "You're alleging that Dylan Sawyer, a prominent attorney, has been systematically defrauding his clients for at least 5 years, to the tune of $18 million. "That's correct," I said. "And you're his mother." "Also correct." She studied me for a long moment. "That can't be easy." "No," I agreed. "It isn't, but it's necessary." Detective Martinez spent an hour going through our documentation. She asked sharp questions, challenged our conclusions, probed for weaknesses in our evidence. It was exactly what she should have done, and I respected her for it. "This is solid work," she finally said. "Really solid. You've essentially done half our investigation for us, but I need to be honest with you about what happens next." "We understand this takes time," Frederick said. "It's not just time. It's resources, jurisdiction, complexity. Some of this money moved through offshore accounts in 3 different countries. The shell companies are registered in Delaware, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands. We'll need to coordinate with federal agencies, possibly Interpol. We're talking months, maybe years, before this goes to trial." "We expected that," I said. "There's something else." Detective Martinez looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Sawyer, you're named as a guarantor in one of these deals. You signed documents. From the outside, it could look like you were complicit. I know how it looks. Do you have a lawyer? Because you're going to need one. When we move on this, there's going to be scrutiny on everyone involved with the firm. You could face civil liability, possibly even criminal investigation." Frederick started to object, but I held up my hand. Detective Martinez is right. I signed documents I should have read more carefully. I allowed my son to use my reputation and my name. Whether I knew about the fraud or not, I bear some responsibility for what happened. "I don't think," Frederick began. "It's all right," I said. "I'm not afraid of scrutiny. I'm 72 years old. I live on a pension in a modest apartment, and I volunteer at a community center. They can investigate me all they want. They'll find an old woman who made the mistake of trusting her son." Detective Martinez nodded slowly. "I believe you. For what it's worth, nothing in this evidence suggests you knew about the fraud. But that doesn't mean prosecutors won't ask hard questions. Let them ask." "All right." She gathered the documents. "I'm going to take this to my lieutenant. If he approves, and I think he will, we'll open a formal investigation. I'll need both of you to come in for official statements, and we'll probably have follow-up questions. This is good work, but it's just the beginning." We left the police station as the winter sun was setting, the sky bruised purple and orange. "You okay?" Frederick asked as we stood on the sidewalk, watching our breath fog in the cold air. "I just turned my son into the police," I said. "I don't think okay is really an option." "No, I suppose not." He pulled his coat tighter. "Can I buy you dinner? Somewhere warm? With wine?" I almost said no. I was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, not fit for company. But the thought of going back to my apartment alone, of sitting with what I'd just done, felt unbearable. "Yes," I said. "Please." We found a small Italian restaurant 3 blocks away, the kind of neighborhood place with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles. The hostess seated us in a corner booth, away from the other diners. and Frederick ordered a bottle of Chianti without looking at the menu. "To truth," he said when the wine arrived, raising his glass. "However painful." "To truth," I echoed. We ate slowly, pasta and bread and a salad we shared, letting the warmth of the restaurant and the wine gradually unknot the tension in our shoulders. Frederick told me about his grandchildren, about his late wife who'd died 3 years ago from cancer, about the manufacturing company he'd built from nothing and sold for enough money to retire comfortably. Or at least, enough money before Dylan had stolen most of it. "I was going to take my grandkids to Europe," he said. "Show them where their grandmother's family came from. Sicily, Ireland, a little bit of everywhere. Make memories while I still could." "You still can," I said. "When we recover the money, if we recover the money." Detective Martinez was being kind when she said months. We both know this could take years, and even then, offshore accounts have a way of staying offshore. He refilled our wine glasses. "I'm not doing this to get rich again. I'm doing it because what he did was wrong, and someone needs to say so. Someone needs to make it matter. It already matters. To the victims, to their families. Does it matter to you?" He asked it quietly, watching my face. Setting aside the legal arguments and the evidence, does it matter to you that your son is a criminal? I thought about Dylan as a child, brilliant and intense, always pushing boundaries. I thought about him in law school, calling me late at night to discuss cases, to argue philosophy, to test theories. I thought about the day I'd made him a partner, how proud I'd been, how certain that I was building something that would outlast me. "I think," I said slowly, "that I've been grieving for months without knowing it. Not for the firm or the money or even my health. For the son I thought I had. For the person I believed he was. And now I know the truth. And grief doesn't excuse anything. It doesn't bring back what he stole or undo what he did. It just is." I set down my wine glass. "He's my son, and I love him. And I'm going to make sure he faces consequences for what he's done." Those things can all be true at the same time. Frederick reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're remarkable. You know that? I'm just a woman who made mistakes and is trying to fix them." "No," he said. "You're someone who refused to be invisible. Someone who could have walked away and instead chose to fight. That's not just fixing mistakes. That's courage." I felt tears threaten and blinked them back. "Tell me more about your grandchildren." He did. And we sat in that warm restaurant until they started putting chairs on tables, talking about everything except the case, the fraud, the betrayal. For a few hours, we were just two people who'd found unexpected friendship in the wreckage of our lives. And that felt like enough. Detective Martinez called 2 days later. "We're moving forward with the investigation," she said. "My lieutenant approved it, and we're coordinating with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. This is going to be big, Mrs. Sawyer. When we move on this, it's going to make news." "I understand. I need you to be prepared for that. Your name is on the firm. The media is going to make connections, ask questions. It could get ugly." "Let it get ugly," I said. "The truth usually is." "There's one more thing. We want to wait until after the holidays to execute the search warrant. Give people time with their families before this explodes." Time with their families. I wondered if Dylan would spend Christmas with his wife and children, if he'd open presents and carve turkey and pretend everything was fine. I wondered if he ever thought about what he'd done to me, to his victims, to the name I'd built. Probably not. Sociopaths rarely did. "After the holidays is fine," I said. "We've waited this long. A few more weeks won't matter." But I was wrong about that. A few more weeks mattered more than I could have imagined. Christmas came wrapped in silence. I'd always loved the holidays, the ritual of decorating, the excuse to gather people I cared about, the way the city transformed itself into something softer and more forgiving. But this year, I put up a small artificial tree that I'd bought at a discount store, hung a few ornaments I'd salvaged from my old life, and tried not to think about the fact that my phone hadn't rung in 3 days. Dylan didn't call. Neither did my daughter, Rebecca, who lived in Seattle with her husband and teenage twins. Rebecca had always been closer to her brother than to me. She'd taken his side after the stroke, accepted his version of events without question. Mom needs to rest, she'd told me during our last conversation in September. You should be grateful Dylan's taking care of everything. Grateful. As if being systematically stripped of everything I'd built was a kindness I should thank him for. Frederick called on Christmas Eve. Are you alone? He asked. Yes, I said, seeing no point in pretending otherwise. So am I. My daughter invited me to Denver, but I told her I had plans. I don't know why I lied. I think I just couldn't face explaining everything yet, pretending to be okay when I'm not. He paused. I have a ham. Too much ham, really, for one person. And potatoes. My wife's recipe. I was going to attempt them. Frederick, I'm not asking because I feel sorry for you. I'm asking because I'd like the company. Because you're the only person who understands what this year has been, and I don't want to spend Christmas alone thinking about it. But if you'd rather— What time? I asked. 6? I'll bring wine. Frederick's house surprised me. I'd expected something grand. He'd been a millionaire, after all, before Dylan had stolen from him. But the address he'd given me led to a modest 2-story in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and left their Christmas lights up until New Year's. I downsized after my wife died, he explained, seeing my expression as he opened the door. The big house felt like a museum. Too many rooms, too many memories. He took my coat. This place feels like home. It did. The furniture was comfortable rather than expensive, the walls covered with family photos and children's artwork. A real Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with what looked like decades of accumulated ornaments. Handmade ones, tacky ones, expensive ones, all mixed together in joyful chaos. My grandkids helped, Frederick said, following my gaze. Before everything happened. Before I had to tell them why Grandpa couldn't afford Disney World this year. We cooked together, moving around his small kitchen with easy coordination. He mashed potatoes while I prepared green beans. We drank wine and listened to Ella Fitzgerald and didn't talk about Dylan or the investigation or what would happen after the holidays ended. Tell me about your husband, Frederick said as we sat down to eat. You've mentioned him, but only in passing. Thomas, I said, surprised by how easily his name still came. He died 23 years ago. Heart attack. He was only 51. I took a sip of wine. He was a teacher, high school English. He made terrible puns and cried at movies and believed that every student could learn to love literature if you just found the right book. Sounds like a good man. He was. He thought I worked too hard, worried I was sacrificing too much for the firm. But he understood why it mattered to me, proving I belonged in rooms that didn't want me there, building something that was mine. I smiled, remembering. He used to bring me dinner at the office when I was working late, Chinese takeout or pizza. He'd sit in my client chair and tell me about his day while I ate, and then he'd kiss me goodnight and go home to put the kids to bed. You must miss him. Every day, but especially this year. He would have known what to do about Dylan. He always saw people more clearly than I did. Their potential, yes, but also their flaws. He worried about Dylan, actually. Thought he was too ambitious, too willing to cut corners. Did he say that? Not in so many words. But looking back, I can see the concern. The careful questions he'd ask. The way he'd change the subject when Dylan talked about his plans. I set down my fork. Thomas died before Dylan joined the firm. I used to think that was tragic, that he'd missed seeing his son follow in my footsteps. Now I wonder if it was a mercy. Knowing what Dylan became might have broken his heart. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with words. Can I ask you something? Frederick said eventually. If we'd met under different circumstances, if none of this had happened, do you think we'd be friends? I considered the question honestly. I don't know. Before the stroke, before I lost everything, I was different. Busier, more focused on achievement. I'm not sure I would have noticed you, to be honest. I wasn't very good at noticing people who couldn't advance my career or my firm. That's surprisingly honest. I'm 72. I don't have time for anything else. I met his eyes. But I'm glad we met, even given the circumstances. You've reminded me that I'm more than what I lost, that who I am isn't defined by what I have. Right back at you, Frederick said quietly. After dinner, we washed dishes together and talked about everything except the investigation. He showed me photos of his grandchildren, Emma, 7, who wanted to be a veterinarian, and Jack, 5, who collected rocks and could name 50 different minerals. His daughter, Susan, who taught middle school math. His son, Michael, who was a paramedic. They're worried about me, Frederick admitted. Susan keeps calling, asking if I'm eating enough, sleeping enough. Michael wants me to see a therapist. They think I'm depressed. Are you? I don't know. Angry, definitely. Betrayed, humiliated, furious. But depressed? He shrugged. Maybe that's just what anger looks like when you're 61 and tired. Or maybe it's what determination looks like, I said. You're fighting back. That's not depression. That's survival. Is that what we're doing? Surviving? What else would you call it? He smiled, but there was sadness in it. I call it refusing to disappear quietly. Refusing to be just another victim no one remembers. I left Frederick's house around 10, full of good food and wine and the strange comfort of shared understanding. The streets were quiet, most people already home with their families, and I felt the loneliness of it settle over me like snow. My phone rang as I was unlocking my apartment door. Mom? I froze, my key still in the lock. Dylan's voice, slightly slurred. He'd been drinking. I could picture him at his house, the big colonial in the suburbs that he'd bought with money I'd helped him earn, surrounded by the trappings of success. What do you want, Dylan? It's Christmas. I thought I should call. How kind. I pushed open my door, turned on lights, set down my purse with deliberate calm. What do you want? I miss you. He said it simply, and I heard the little boy he'd been underneath the man he'd become. The kids asked about you today. Asked why Grandma wasn't here for Christmas. I didn't know what to tell them. You could have told them the truth. That you stole my firm, bankrupted me, and set me up to take the fall for your fraud. Silence. Then, you're still angry about that. Angry? I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Dylan, angry doesn't begin to cover what I feel. I did what was necessary. The firm needed strong leadership, and you weren't capable after the stroke. I protected our legacy. Our legacy? There is no our legacy. I built that firm, alone, while raising you and your sister after your father died. Every client, every case, every reputation carefully earned, and you stole it. I didn't steal anything. I took over when you couldn't. You made me a guarantor on a fraudulent deal. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Years of held rage finally breaking through. You used my name, my reputation, to cover your theft. You waited until I was weakest, most vulnerable, and you took everything. Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder, defensive. I don't know what you think you know, but you need to be careful about making accusations. Slander is still slander, even from a mother. Is that a threat? It's advice. From someone who still cares about you. Despite everything. Despite everything. I sat down heavily on my small couch. Dylan, do you even understand what you did? Not just to me, to your clients, to people who trusted you. Every business has risks. People know that. This wasn't business risk. This was theft. Calculated, deliberate theft. I don't have to listen to this. His voice turned cold, the way it did when he was about to end a losing argument. I called because it's Christmas. Because I thought maybe we could move past this, be a family again. But if you're going to be unreasonable, I turned you into the police. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and final. What? His voice was barely a whisper. 2 weeks ago, I gave them evidence of your fraud, multiple victims, $18 million, 5 years of systematic theft. The FBI is involved now. They're waiting until after the holidays, but they're coming for you, Dylan. And I'm the one who gave them everything they need. You're lying. You couldn't. I'm your mother, and I love you, but I won't protect you from the consequences of what you've done. Not anymore. I could hear his breathing over the phone, rapid and panicked. Mom, listen to me. Whatever you think you found, you're wrong. Those deals were complicated, yes, but everything was legal. If you go through with this, you'll be destroying the firm. Dad's legacy. everything he believed in. Don't you dare bring your father into this. My voice shook. Thomas was a good man, an honest man. He would be ashamed of what you've become. I'm his son. I'm your son. How can you do this to your own family? How could you do it to yours? I asked. How could you look me in the eye every day, knowing what you'd done? How could you take my firm, my reputation, my security, and feel nothing? I felt... He stopped. Started again. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Things got complicated. The deals didn't go the way I'd planned. So you stole more to cover the first thefts, and then more to cover those, until you'd stolen from 9 people and destroyed their lives. 9? His voice cracked. You found 9? Did you think there were more? He didn't answer. The silence told me everything I needed to know. How many, Dylan? How many people did you steal from? I need to go. I have to think. The police are coming. Running won't help. You don't understand what you've done. To me, to your grandchildren, to Rebecca. When this comes out, we'll all be destroyed. Then you should have thought of that before you became a criminal. My voice was steady now, calm. Goodbye, Dylan. Mom, please. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I sat in my quiet apartment, my small Christmas tree blinking its cheerful lights, and let myself feel the full weight of what I'd just done. I'd confronted my son. I'd confirmed his guilt. I'd guaranteed that when the police moved, he'd know I was responsible. And I felt no regret. Only a strange, sad relief that the pretending was finally over. My phone rang again immediately. Dylan's number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang 3 more times over the next hour. Dylan, then Rebecca, then Dylan again. I didn't answer. Whatever they had to say could wait until morning, until I was ready to hear it. I went to bed that night and slept better than I had in months. The day after Christmas, my phone exploded with messages. Rebecca called 6 times before I finally answered. What did you do? She demanded, her voice high and panicked. Dylan called me last night, completely hysterical. He says you've accused him of fraud, that you've gone to the police with lies. They're not lies. Mom, this is insane. Dylan said you're confused, that maybe the stroke affected you more than we thought. He's worried about you. We all are. I'm not confused, Rebecca. I'm clearer than I've been in months. I was making coffee in my small kitchen, watching the machine drip with hypnotic steadiness. Your brother is a thief. He's stolen from his clients, and I've given evidence to the police. Evidence of what? Some business deals you don't understand? Mom, you're not practicing law anymore. You don't know. I practiced law for 38 years. I know fraud when I see it. This is crazy. She was crying now, her voice breaking. You're tearing this family apart. Don't you care what this will do to Dylan's children? To his wife? They could lose everything. Like I lost everything? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Rebecca, where were you when your brother took my firm? When he left me with a pension I can barely live on? When he made me a guarantor on a fraudulent deal that destroyed my credit and my savings? He was protecting you. You'd had a stroke. You couldn't run the firm anymore. Did you ever ask me if that was true? Did you ever visit, see how I was doing, wonder why I was suddenly living in a tiny apartment? Silence. Then quietly, you seemed fine. Dylan said you were adjusting well. Dylan lied. About that, about the firm, about everything. I poured my coffee, added cream with a steady hand. I understand this is hard to hear, but your brother is not who you think he is. He's my brother, he's family, and you're choosing strangers over him. I'm choosing the truth over comfortable lies. There's a difference. I don't want to talk to you right now. Her voice was cold, distant. Maybe when you come to your senses, when you realize what you've done. Rebecca, I love you, but I'm not going to apologize for doing the right thing. She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood in my kitchen, holding my coffee, and felt the full weight of my choice. My daughter thought I was crazy or vindictive or both. My son was probably consulting criminal defense attorneys. And somewhere in the suburbs, my grandchildren, Dylan's kids, whom I hadn't seen since before the stroke, were being told that their grandmother had lost her mind. My phone buzzed with a text from Frederick. How are you holding up? I typed back. Family knows. It's as bad as expected. You? His response came quickly. Told my daughter yesterday. She's supportive but worried. Asked if I was sure. I told her I'd never been more sure of anything. Coffee later? I typed. Community center noon? See you there. Frederick was already waiting when I arrived. 2 coffees from the shop down the street sitting on our usual table. The community center was quiet during the holiday week. Most of the programs suspended. Just a few volunteers organizing donations in the main room. You look tired, he said as I sat down. Dylan called on Christmas, then Rebecca the next morning. The family has officially chosen sides, and I'm not on the winning team. I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew it would happen. I wrapped my hands around the warm coffee cup. How did your daughter take it? Better than I expected. Susan's a math teacher. She likes evidence, logic. When I showed her the documents, explained the patterns, she got it immediately. He paused. She asked if I was doing this for the money or for justice. I told her I didn't know anymore. Maybe both. Maybe neither. What do you think you're doing it for? He considered the question, staring into his coffee. I think I'm doing it because someone has to. Because if we don't, he'll do it to someone else. And because... He trailed off. Because? Because I'm 61 years old, and I don't want the last chapter of my life to be about being a victim. I want it to be about fighting back, even if I lose. About standing up, even when it's hard. Does that sound stupid? No, I said quietly. It sounds exactly right. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our coffee, watching through the window as people hurried past in the cold. Detective Martinez called this morning, Frederick said eventually. They're executing the search warrant on the firm tomorrow, December 27th. She wanted us to know before it hits the news. Tomorrow. After months of preparation, investigation, evidence gathering, it was finally happening. The police would arrive at Helena Sawyer and Associates with warrants. They'd search files, seize computers, interview staff. And Dylan would know without question that his crimes had caught up with him. Are you ready? Frederick asked. I don't think ready is possible, but I'm willing. That's enough. The news broke the next afternoon. I was at home when my phone started buzzing with news alerts. Prominent attorney under investigation for fraud. FBI raids local law firm. Multi-million-dollar theft alleged. And then, inevitably, attorney's mother provided evidence in fraud case. I turned off my phone. For 2 hours, I sat in my quiet apartment and tried not to think about what was happening. The police going through files I'd organized, cases I'd worked, the office I'd built, staff members being questioned, trying to understand how their workplace had been used for fraud, and Dylan watching everything he'd stolen crumble around him. When I finally turned my phone back on, I had 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages, reporters requesting interviews, former colleagues wanting explanations, Rebecca calling over and over, leaving voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to, and one message from Detective Martinez. Search completed. Substantial evidence seized. Thank you for your cooperation. We'll be in touch soon. It was done. There was no going back now. The media frenzy lasted 3 days. My name was everywhere. Helena Sawyer, founder of the firm, who reportedly provided evidence against her own son. Photos of me from 20 years ago, accepting an award at a legal conference, looking successful and confident and nothing like the woman I'd become. Photos of Dylan, handsome and polished in his expensive suits. Photos of the firm's office building, now with yellow police tape across the entrance. The stories were remarkably accurate, probably because Detective Martinez had controlled the narrative. Multiple victims, millions stolen, years of systematic fraud. Some articles painted me as a tragic figure, a mother forced to choose between family loyalty and justice. Others implied I might have been complicit, that my sudden cooperation was suspicious, that perhaps I was trying to avoid prosecution myself. I didn't read most of them. What was the point? Frederick called every day, checking on me, making sure I was eating, reminding me that this would pass. The news cycle moves fast, he said. Next week there'll be some other scandal, and we'll be yesterday's story. Will we, though? I asked. Or will this follow us forever? He didn't have an answer for that. On the fourth day, Marcy from the community center called. "I saw the news," she said without preamble. "About your son, about the fraud, about everything. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I couldn't stop. You don't owe me an explanation." Her voice was firm but kind. "I'm calling because I wanted you to know that your volunteer position is still here, if you want it. Some of the board members are worried about publicity, about the center being associated with the scandal, but I reminded them that you're a victim in this too, and that you've done nothing but help people since you started volunteering here." I felt tears threaten. "Thank you. Also, there's a woman here. She came in asking for you specifically. Says she needs legal advice about a contract dispute. I told her you probably weren't available, given everything, but she's insistent. Said she'll wait. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The woman waiting in the legal aid room was young, maybe 30, with a baby in a carrier strapped to her chest. She stood when I entered, her face a mixture of hope and desperation. "Mrs. Sawyer, I'm Amanda Torres. I know this is a terrible time, and you probably don't want to be here, but I didn't know where else to go." The words tumbled out quickly. "I saw you on the news. They said you used to be a lawyer, that you've been volunteering here. Sit down," I said gently. "Tell me what's happened." She did. A predatory loan on a car she couldn't afford, with terms she hadn't understood. Interest rates that violated state law, penalties that multiplied faster than she could pay, a contract designed to keep her in debt forever. She'd missed 2 payments while on maternity leave, and now they were threatening repossession, threatening to sue, threatening to garnish her wages. I listened, took notes, asked questions. The familiar rhythm of client intake settled over me, pushing away the exhaustion and the scandal and the family drama. This woman needed help, and I knew how to help her. "This contract is illegal," I said after reviewing her documents. "The interest rate exceeds the state cap, and these penalty clauses are unconscionable. You have grounds to challenge the entire agreement." "Really?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought everyone made me feel like I was stupid for signing it, like it was my fault. It's not your fault. These companies prey on people who need transportation, who are desperate, who don't have the money for a lawyer to review contracts." I pulled out a notepad and started writing. "Here's what we're going to do." For the next hour, I walked her through her options, drafted a response to the lender, explained her rights under consumer protection laws. The baby woke up halfway through and needed to be fed, so we took a break while Amanda nursed, and I made copies of her documents and organized a file for her. "I can't pay you," Amanda said as she was leaving. "I saw that you're not practicing law anymore, but if there's a fee—" "There's no fee. This is volunteer work." I handed her the file. "Follow these steps, keep copies of everything you send them, and call me if they threaten you again. We'll fight this together." She hugged me, careful of the baby between us. "Thank you. You don't know what this means." But I did know. I knew exactly what it meant. To have someone listen, to have someone believe you, to have someone with knowledge and experience stand beside you when you felt powerless. After she left, I sat alone in the small room with alphabet letters above the chalkboard and felt something shift inside me. The scandal would continue. The investigation would progress. My family would remain angry or distant or both. Dylan would face consequences for what he'd done. But this, helping people who needed it, using my skills for something meaningful, being visible again but on my own terms, this was mine. No one could take it from me. Not Dylan, not the stroke, not age or poverty or scandal. I was Helena Sawyer, and I was still a lawyer in the ways that mattered most. Frederick found me there an hour later, still sitting at the desk, lost in thought. "How are you doing?" he asked, settling into the chair across from me. "Better than expected." I told him about Amanda, about the predatory loan, about feeling useful again. I'd forgotten what this feels like, helping someone who really needs it, not because they can pay my hourly rate, but because it's right. "You're remarkable," he said, not for the first time. "I'm just doing what I should have been doing all along." I looked at him seriously. "Frederick, when this is over, when the trial happens, when Dylan's sentenced, when the scandal fades, I think I want to keep doing this, volunteering, helping people who can't afford lawyers. I think that's a perfect plan." What about you? What will you do? He smiled. I've been thinking about that. I can't get my money back, not all of it, maybe not even most of it. But I've still got my pension, my social security, this house. I'm not rich anymore, but I'm not destitute either. Maybe that's enough. Maybe I don't need to spend my retirement traveling Europe. Maybe I just need to matter. You already matter. So do you, he said. Don't forget that. Spring arrived slowly, like someone learning to trust again. A preliminary hearing was set for late April, 9 months after I'd first met Frederick in the community center, 7 months after we'd gone to the police, 4 months after the FBI had raided the firm. Dylan had been arrested in January, released on bond, and was now living in his suburban house under electronic monitoring while his very expensive defense attorneys prepared his case. 11 victims in total. $23 million. 5 years of fraud. The numbers had grown as the investigation deepened. Detective Martinez kept finding more. Clients Dylan had targeted, schemes we'd missed, money hidden in accounts even more complex than we'd imagined. Each new discovery felt like another knife wound, another betrayal, another piece of evidence that my son wasn't just a criminal, but a calculating, remorseless one. Rebecca still wasn't speaking to me. She'd sent one email in February. I hope you're proud of yourself. You've destroyed our family. Dylan's children ask me why Grandma sent their daddy to jail. What am I supposed to tell them? I'd written back, tell them the truth, that their father hurt people, and actions have consequences. Tell them their grandmother loves them and always will. She never responded. But the silence from my daughter hurt less than I'd expected. I'd spent months grieving the family I'd thought I had. Now I was learning to appreciate the family I'd chosen. Frederick, Marcy, the volunteers at the community center, the clients who came seeking help and left with hope. Amanda Torres stopped by once a month to update me on her case. We'd filed a formal complaint against the predatory lender, and they'd quickly settled rather than face scrutiny of their practices. She'd gotten her car paid off and $3,000 in compensation. You changed my life, she told me, and I'd thought, no, you reminded me of mine. Frederick and I had developed a routine, Tuesday and Thursday mornings at the community center, helping whoever walked through the door. Wednesday afternoons, we'd review evidence for the trial, meeting with prosecutors, preparing testimony. Fridays, we'd have dinner together, sometimes at his house, sometimes at small restaurants we'd discovered. Once memorably at my apartment where I'd attempted to cook and we'd ended up ordering pizza. Are we dating? He asked one Friday in March as we shared a bottle of wine in his living room. The question caught me off guard. I don't know. Are we? I think we might be. I mean, we spend most of our time together. We talk every day. I think about you constantly. That seems like dating. We met because my son stole your retirement money, I pointed out. True. Not the most romantic origin story. He refilled my wine glass. But here's the thing. I'm 61, you're 72. We've both lost spouses we loved. We've both been betrayed and rebuilt ourselves. At our age, do we really need to pretend we don't know what we want? And what do you want? You, he said simply. Your company, your sharp mind, your terrible jokes, your refusal to give up even when everything's falling apart. I want whatever this is we're building together. I felt something warm unfold in my chest, like flowers opening toward sun. I want that too. So, we're dating? I suppose we are, I smiled. Though I should warn you, I'm terrible at this. I've been alone for 23 years. I have strange habits. I read legal briefs before bed. I eat cereal for dinner sometimes. I fall asleep to detective shows. I organize my closet by color. I talk to my dead wife's photo every morning. He took my hand. We're both a mess, Helena. But maybe we can be a mess together. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. He kissed me then, gentle and tentative, like we were teenagers figuring it out for the first time. And maybe we were, figuring out how to be new people with new lives, building something hopeful from the wreckage of what we'd lost. The trial began on April 23rd. The courthouse steps were crowded with media, cameras, reporters shouting questions. Frederick and I entered through a side door, following Detective Martinez's advice to avoid the circus. Inside, the halls were quieter but still tense, filled with lawyers and victims and the machinery of justice grinding slowly forward. Dylan was already seated at the defense table when we entered the courtroom. He'd lost weight, looked older, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose on his frame. He didn't look at me as I took my seat in the gallery, didn't acknowledge my presence at all. His wife, Jennifer, sat behind him with their 2 children, my grandchildren, whom I barely knew. The boy was 14 now, tall and uncomfortable in his suit. The girl was 11, crying quietly into her mother's shoulder. Jennifer's eyes met mine across the courtroom, and the hatred in them was palpable. I looked away first. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Prosecutors presented our evidence methodically. Bank records, forged documents, victim testimony. Frederick took the stand and described how Dylan had earned his trust, manipulated him, stolen from him. His voice was steady, factual, devastating. Sharon Sue testified about losing her husband's life insurance money. The Odoms described how they'd trusted Dylan with their retirement and now struggled to afford medication. Anthony Reeves broke down describing how his disabled daughter had lost the care she needed because her trust fund had been emptied. I watched Dylan during their testimony. He sat still, expressionless, taking notes, whispering to his lawyers, showing nothing, feeling nothing as far as I could tell. The defense argued mistakes, not malice. Complicated business deals gone wrong. Market forces beyond Dylan's control. They painted him as ambitious but ethical, a lawyer trying his best in difficult circumstances. They never called me to testify. The prosecution had decided my testimony wasn't necessary. Our documented evidence spoke for itself. But more than that, they'd worried that putting a mother against her son on the stand would bias the jury toward sympathy. Better to let the documents and other victims tell the story. On the 12th day of trial, I was called to the prosecution's office. "We've received a plea offer," Assistant District Attorney Catherine Ogden said, gesturing for Frederick and me to sit. "Dylan's attorneys want to negotiate." "What are they offering?" Frederick asked. 7 years in federal prison, full restitution to victims, surrender of his law license, cooperation in identifying any remaining hidden assets. She paused. "It's a good deal. It guarantees he serves time, guarantees victims get something back. If we proceed to verdict, we might get more years, but restitution becomes much more complicated." "What do you recommend?" I asked. "I think we should take it. The evidence is strong, but trials are unpredictable. This guarantees justice, guarantees consequences. And 7 years is substantial. He'll be in his 50s when he's released. His career is over, his reputation destroyed. He'll lose everything that mattered to him. Everything that mattered to him. The firm, the status, the money, the respect. Not his family. He'd already sacrificed that. Not his integrity, that had been gone for years. Just the external markers of success that he'd been willing to commit crimes to obtain. "I want to talk to him," I said. Catherine looked surprised. "That's unusual, and not required. You don't owe him anything." "I know, but I need to do this. For myself, not for him." They arranged it for the next morning, in a small conference room at the courthouse. Dylan sat on one side of the table, his lawyer beside him. I sat across from them, with Catherine present but silent. Dylan looked at me for the first time since the trial began. "Hello, Mom." "Hello, Dylan." Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. "My lawyer says you wanted to talk," he finally said. "I'm not sure what there is to say. You've destroyed my life, made your point. Congratulations. I didn't destroy your life. You did that yourself." My voice was calm, measured. "I just made sure you faced consequences for it. Same thing, from where I'm sitting." "No, it's not." I leaned forward. "Dylan, did you ever think about them? The people you stole from? Did you think about Sharon Sue working at 74 to afford groceries? About Frederick losing the retirement he'd spent 40 years building? About Anthony's daughter losing her care? They were business deals that went bad. It happens. They were thefts. Calculated, deliberate thefts from people who trusted you." He looked away. "You wouldn't understand. The pressure, the expectations. Everyone wanting Helena Sawyer's son to be brilliant, exceptional. Do you know what it's like growing up in your shadow? So you decided to destroy what I built, to steal from my clients, use my reputation as bait, set me up to take the fall for your crimes. I was protecting the firm. Those early deals, yes, they went wrong. But I was trying to fix them, to make everyone whole. It just got complicated. You had 5 years to make it right. Instead, you stole more to cover the first thefts. You made me a guarantor on a fraudulent deal. You took my firm after my stroke and left me with nothing. I kept my voice steady. And you never once considered telling the truth. The truth would have destroyed everything. Your lies destroyed everything. The truth just made it visible. Dylan's lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Sawyer, we're prepared to accept the plea agreement. 7 years, full restitution. But my client would like to know if you support this resolution. It doesn't matter if I support it. This isn't about me. It does matter, Dylan said quietly. You're my mother. Whatever I've done, whatever I've become, I need to know. Do you forgive me? The question hung in the air between us. Forgiveness. As if saying the word could erase the damage, reset everything to before, make us a family again. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday. Maybe never. Right now, I'm still learning to forgive myself for not seeing who you were sooner, for trusting you when I should have questioned, for teaching you skills you used to hurt people. That's not fair. You were a good mother. You taught me everything. I taught you law. I didn't teach you character. That was supposed to come from somewhere else, from your father, from your own moral compass, from basic human decency. I can't take responsibility for you choosing to abandon all of that. So that's it? 7 years in prison, and then what? Do I still have a mother? I thought about that, about who I'd been before, who I'd become, who I wanted to be going forward, about the family I'd lost and the family I'd found, about justice and mercy and the complicated space between them. You'll always be my son, I said finally. I'll always love you, in the way that mothers love their children even when they've done terrible things. But I won't lie for you, or cover for you, or pretend you didn't make choices that destroyed lives. You'll serve your time. You'll make restitution. And after that, if you want to rebuild some kind of relationship, we can talk. But it will be honest, Dylan. No more lies, no more manipulation, just truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And if I can't do that, then I'll still love you, but from a distance. He nodded slowly, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I am genuinely sorry. I believe you're sorry you got caught, I said. Whether you're sorry for what you did, that's something you'll have to figure out in prison. Dylan accepted the plea agreement that afternoon. 7 years in federal prison, full restitution to all victims, permanent disbarment. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, a formality now that the plea was entered. Frederick and I left the courthouse together, emerging into spring sunshine that felt like absolution. The media was waiting, but Catherine had prepared a statement, and we didn't have to say anything. We just walked past the cameras, hand in hand, two people who'd refused to be invisible. How do you feel? Frederick asked when we were finally in his car, driving away from the courthouse. Tired, sad, relieved. I watched the city pass by outside the window. Like I've been holding my breath for months and can finally exhale. Me too. We drove to the community center. There was work to do, people who needed help, cases to review, lives to rebuild one legal question at a time. Marcy greeted us at the door with her usual warmth, and there were already 3 people waiting in the legal aid room. A young couple with medical debt they couldn't afford. An elderly man facing eviction from the apartment he'd lived in for 30 years. A single mother whose employer was withholding wages. I sat down at the desk, not mahogany, just a simple folding table, and opened my notebook. Tell me what happened, I said to the first client. Start from the beginning. And as they spoke, I felt something settle into place. This was who I was now. Not the successful attorney with the prestigious firm. Not the woman defined by what she'd lost. Not even primarily Dylan's mother. I was Helena Sawyer, 72 years old, living in a modest apartment, dating a man I'd met through mutual disaster, volunteering at a community center, and helping people who needed someone to fight for them. I was visible again. Not because I'd reclaimed my old life, but because I'd built a new one. Smaller in some ways, infinitely larger in others. That evening, Frederick and I had dinner at a small Thai restaurant we'd discovered. We talked about the case, about the relief of it being over, about what came next. "I've been thinking," Frederick said over pad Thai, "about the restitution. If they actually recover the money, and it's a big if, I'll get some of it back. Maybe 20%, maybe more. It won't be everything, but it'll be something." "That's good. Here's the thing. I don't need it anymore. I've adjusted to living on less. My house is paid off. My needs are simple. But I was thinking, what if we started something? A legal aid fund, maybe, to help people like Amanda, like the folks who come to the community center. People who need lawyers but can't afford them." I stared at him. "You want to use the money Dylan stole from you to help his other victims?" "Not just his victims. Anyone who needs it. Turn something terrible into something good. Make it mean something beyond just revenge or justice." He reached across the table, took my hand. "We could do it together. You provide the legal expertise, I'll handle the administrative side. Nothing huge, nothing overwhelming. Just a small fund to pay for legal fees, filing costs, things people can't afford." "That's a beautiful idea. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." We toasted with Thai iced tea, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone trying to reclaim what they'd lost, but the quiet hope of someone building something new, something better, something that mattered. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, I stood outside the community center with Frederick, watching workers hang a new sign, the Second Chances Legal Fund. We'd used Frederick's restitution money, $38,000 recovered from one of Dylan's offshore accounts, as seed funding. We'd filed the paperwork, assembled a small board of directors, recruited volunteer attorneys. Nothing fancy, nothing corporate, just a way to help people who needed someone in their corner. "You ready?" Frederick asked, squeezing my hand. "I've been ready for a long time." We went inside, where our first official client was waiting, a teenage girl who'd been denied her inheritance by a dishonest guardian. She sat nervously in the legal aid room, hoping someone would listen, someone would care, someone would help. I sat across from her, opened my notebook, and smiled. "Tell me what happened," I said. "Start from the beginning. And don't leave anything out. We're going to fight for you." Because that's what I did now. Not for money, not for prestige, not to build an empire with my name on it. I fought for people who needed fighting for. I stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. I chose truth over comfort, justice over family loyalty, purpose over invisibility. I was 73 years old, and I'd never been more certain of who I was. My son was in prison. My daughter wouldn't speak to me. The firm I'd built bore my name, but was being dismantled, sold for parts to cover restitution. But I had Frederick. I had meaningful work. I had clients who needed me, and a community that valued me. I had a second chance to be the person I'd always meant to be. And that, I'd learned, was worth more than everything I'd lost. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.